Welcome guys, it's happy to have you on board. And if it's your first time, consider subscribing. There's great content on the way and hit the bell notification so that you don't miss anything. In this course, we'll learn about how to get started with Amazon Web Services or AWS. If you've heard of the cloud but you don't know what it is, you're in the right place. We're gonna get started from the beginning and cover some of the basic concepts you'll need to be successful. So, what is cloud anyway? The cloud is just renting another person's computer. When you use the cloud, you pay a company like Amazon, for example, to run computer programs for you. The company is known as cloud provider. Amazon isn't the only cloud provider out there. There are many others. Introducing well-known companies like Google, Microsoft and HP, but less well-known companies like Rackspace, DigitalOcean and SoftLayer. But right now, Amazon is the biggest, most well-known and most actively used cloud provider in the world. That's why people sometimes use the terms AWS and cloud interchangeably, even when they actually mean two different things. It's sort of how people refer to all copy machines as Xerox. So, the cloud is renting computer from other companies, and AWS is the biggest, most popular company that you can rent computer from. Well, what's the big deal? Why don't people just buy their own computer instead of renting them from others? There are two main reasons for that: avoiding maintenance and flexible cost. Let's talk about maintenance first. Computer have needs, and sometimes those needs are deceptively difficult to meet. Computer need electricity and they need it. A cloud provider makes sure that the computers they rent on have backup generators so that they'll keep running even if the power goes out. Computer need to be kept cool so they don't overheat. Cloud provider makes sure computers are cooled appropriately at all time. Computer hardware can break. A cloud provider is always ready to replace the breakage or immediately give you a replacement computer that works properly. Hard drives can fail, resulting in data loss. If you store your data with a cloud provider, they'll copy it to multiple hard drives so that even if one of them fail, your data is still safe. Criminal can steal computers to access sensitive information like credit card numbers. Cloud provider keep their computer in secure facilities with guards to be sure that your data can't be physically stolen. Developing an application is hard enough without also dealing with all of these problems. Cloud providers take care of the maintenance computer needs to give you a solid foundation to building your application on top of. So, the cloud lets you avoid maintenance, which is great. The other reason why people like the cloud is because of flexible cost. In the past, before the cloud existed, a company would have to spend thousands of dollars at the start of every project buying the computers they needed. Sometimes they could reuse old computers, but technology improved so quickly that it usually makes sense to buy a new computer every few years. These computers need to be powerful enough to run the project at maximum capacity, even though you very rarely reach maximum capacity. This is known as a fixed upfront cost. It's fixed because it can't be changed. You almost always need to buy a computer, and it's upfront because you pay it at the start of the project. Even if something goes wrong after only a few days and the whole project gets cancelled, you still have to pay the upfront. The cloud isn't like that. Instead of a fixed upfront cost, you can only pay for what you use. That means if you just need a small computer for testing and development, it's very. If you need to scale up to a more powerful computer for production, it costs a bit more, but it's still cheaper than buying it yourself. As you scale up, your price rises, but as you scale down, your price drops. Without fixed upfront cost, you can pay to support your average capacity instead of your maximum capacity. and scale up for those peak times. It's also much easier to try out short experiment project. Everyone wins. Cloud provider like Amazon rent out their computers to others and they handle the maintenance of those computers. Flexible cost also makes the cloud more affordable, but how much does that actually cost? I'll talk about it in a few. AWS can be very cheap or very expensive depending on how you use it. To understand pricing on AWS, we need to talk about two related concepts: space and time. Space is the measure of capacity or capability. For example, a computer with a large hard drive is capable of holding a lot of information, so we say it has a lot of space. But its storage capacity isn't the only kind of capacity there is. What about processor capacity? A computer with a fast processor is capable of processing a lot of information. So we also say that it has a lot of space, even if it has only a small hard drive. There's also a network capacity, which is how fast the computer is able to talk to other computers over a network. We could say that a computer is very fast network has a lot of space. Basically, you can think of space as a measure of how powerful a computer is. More powerful computers are capable of holding more stuff and doing more stuff. Then there's time. Time is a pretty straightforward concept. It's a measure of how long it takes to do something. But things get a bit more complicated when you have multiple actors working simultaneously. Let's say you need to stuff 60 envelopes and it takes a minute to stuff one envelope. It's going to take 60 minutes of work, right? Well, what if you have 4 people stuffing envelopes simultaneously? Each person only has to stuff 15 envelopes, so it takes 15 minutes. But the task hasn't got any smaller. It's still 60 minutes of work even if it took 15 minutes of time on. When we talk about time with computer, we usually talk about the total work time added to all the computers that are working on the task together. So how does all this relates to AWS? Anything that you do will require some amount of space, some amount of time, or both. The price you pay is based on space multiplied by time. In addition, you usually trade space for time, at least to some degree. Let's take a look at an example to understand what this means. You and your friend are going on a vacation and you will be staying at the Amazon hotel. You need to decide how many rooms to book and how many nights you'll be staying at the hotel. At the Amazon hotel, you can book a regular room or a suite. A suite has more space, but it costs more than a regular room. How do you make sure that you can stay at the hotel as long as possible while not paying too much? You could always try to squeeze into one room. This means that you'll be able to stay at the Amazon hotel for a long time because one room isn't very expensive. However, you're sacrificing space at the extent of time, and no one will sleep very well in that cramped space. Alternatively, everyone could get their own room or even their separate suite. Now, everyone has a lot of space, but that gets expensive quickly and you might not be able to afford one night at a hotel. Effectively, you're sacrificing time to get extra space. The best approach is somewhat in the middle, as you would have already guessed. A small number of rooms and suites shared so that everyone has just enough space will make sure that you pay the minimum amount of the maximum benefit. So far, we have been talking about AWS like it's just one thing, but it's not. AWS is actually a whole constellation of services which can be used together or separately. Each service in AWS has its own name and they all do different things and cost different amounts. In this video, we'll talk about the 2 biggest, most popular services in AWS, the S3 and EC2. the S3 stands for Simple Storage Service, and it's probably the simplest service that AWS offers. As the name implies, S3 is used for storage. You put your data in and then take it back out again. That's all, nothing particularly complicated. S3 will hold whatever data you want for as long as you want. As discussed previously, the cost of using S3 is based on space multiplied by time. The more data you store, the longer you store it, the more it will cost. But don't worry, S3 is remarkably cheap. You could store 100 GB in S3 for a year and it would cost less than $50. Would you believe it? And then there's EC2. EC2 stands for Elastic Cloud Computer and it's used for processing and computation. With EC2, you basically rent a computer from Amazon and you can run whatever program you want on that computer. This computer is called an instance and it works a bit differently from your computer at home. For starters, an EC2 instance doesn't come with a hard drive. In order to read and write data on an EC2 instance, you need to connect it to one of the data storage service that AWS provides, such as an S3. The cost of using EC2 is only based on space multiplied by time. For EC2, the space part of the equation is based on the factors like processing speed, write speed, available RAM, and so on. The time part of the equation is based on how long the instance is running. You can also multiply instances simultaneously. You can run one instance for 8 hours and two identical instances for 4 hours, and it would cost the same amount. It's important to point out that the cost is based on time, not activity. An EC2 instance that is working as hard as it can costs the same amount as an EC2 instance that is sitting idle doing nothing. Instance, Amazon keeps on charging for the instance as long as it's running. So if you're not using an instance, you can shut it down to save money. EC2 can be very cheap or very expensive, depending on how you use it. Fortunately, if you're new to Amazon Web Service, Amazon will let you try it out for free. For the first year after you sign up for an AWS account, Amazon will let you store a little bit of data on S3 and run a small EC2 instance for no charge. Pretty cool, right? And I'm loving it. Amazon is hoping that you'll start using AWS even for free, so that they can start charging you money after your free trial expires at the end of 1 year. Well guys, it's a way far away. Check out in the description below for more information. There's a lot more to AWS than S3 and EC2. But those two services are the most important ones to know. In the next stage of the course, we dive into S3 and learn how to use it to store and retrieve files. We won't be spending any more time on EC2 in this course, but don't worry, there's another course on the way. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Looking back, we have come a long way. Good job guys, thanks for following along the video. Now you have a basic understanding of what a cloud is, what AWS is, and that's a very good move. You could always show your support by liking, sharing or subscribing this video, or by heading over to patreon.com/Team CodeBig. You can also find a link to this in the description below. Keep supporting us, keep coding big, and see you in the next video guys.